demo. We'll post all of it so people can share it if they want. So yeah, my name is Erez. I've been running a company called Showroom here in town for the past 15 months, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we took this from idea ultimately to market, and I'm also going to talk about some lessons we learned in the process, and then I'm going to do that really shortly and then open the floor to some questions. Hopefully I give you guys some things to ask me about because I always like the Q&A better anyways. So the original idea for Showroom started back in the spring of 2012, and the idea was created as a result of a 4-hour drive with me and a friend from South Florida to Gainesville after a spring break. And we were just thinking, you know, what is a space that technology hasn't really changed yet? You know, that was in the midst of, you know, we were at the peak of that kind of college bubble where you just feel like the world is limitless and all you have to do is find the right idea, and then all you have to do is kind of like just make it happen and everything takes care of itself. And the idea that we ended up, or the space that we really thought was perfectly poised for disruption was the retail clothing space. So if you really think about the way people shop for clothes, it's been the same way for a very long time. Technology hasn't really disrupted the way people fundamentally interact with clothing and clothing stores. So we came up with an idea for a store that we were going to call No Lines. And what No Lines was going to be is a place where you could buy very high-end fashion from clothing that have 0 brands attached to them. So no lines in the sense that there's no fashion lines associated with the things you're wearing. You can imagine the price could be a lot lower if you didn't have Armani on a shirt or something like that. And then the other reason we were going to call it No Lines is because we wanted to fundamentally build technology into every aspect of the store so that no one ever had to wait in line to try something on, check out of the store, or any other aspect of the store. So the shopping experience would be such that you'd walk in with your smartphone, and instead of having racks and racks of clothing throughout the store and picking things off the rack and going to the fitting rooms and trying them on, and then waiting in line again for the cash register to check out, we wanted to create a process where the store would essentially be an experiential, kind of like a gallery, where there's one of each item that the store has, and that you'd take your phone and you'd bump an item and you'd go throughout the store and kind of build a virtual fitting room on your mobile device based on what's appealing to you visually. So you don't have to carry anything around the store with you. And then you submit that request to the store, and while they get your order ready for you in the sizes that you're interested in, the back of the store would be getting that stuff ready for you. People would be doing it according to our original plan. And there would be a nice little espresso corner, kind of like this awesome espresso that Starter Space has, thanks to Gulejo. And you'd help yourself to a cup of coffee while you were having this order created for you. And then you would get a notification once your clothing is ready. You'd try it on, and then you'd have a very easy selection on your phone, which items you'd like to keep and which items you'd like to give back. Whatever you'd like to give back, you just leave in the fitting room. And whatever you'd like to take with you, all you have to do is click one button, and we'll already have your credit card information in the app, and then all you have to do is walk out of the store with those things. Basically eliminating the whole checkout process of clothing stores. The original idea, actually, we wanted to build the store. We wanted to source the product, we wanted to hire the employees, we wanted to get our own storefront, we wanted to do everything. So that's probably lesson number 1, is don't try to do everything off the bat. For the first 4 months of 2013, when we actually decided to start working on it, we tried to figure out how to do that, how to get the store, how to get the product sourced, and how to build the technology. So 3 main projects. And that was very difficult. We learned a lot in the process, but we also came to conclude that we had no business being in the space of opening our own store, and we did not know enough about the fashion supply chain to actually create our own merchandise. So we ended up deciding to try to find ways to take that technological vision for the experience and build it into existing clothing stores. To take a step back for a second, what I did between when I had the original idea with my friend and actually started the company was graduate college, and then I started a job in San Francisco doing investment banking. And then about 7 months into that job, I decided I didn't want to do that anymore. And we had an opportunity to start this company with some money from friends and family. So that catalyzed the whole process of starting the company, and found ourselves back in Florida. And after we decided to shift towards software, so jumping back to the timeline for showroom, we decided to relocate from South Florida to Gainesville because it was a cheaper work environment for us. We were starting to dig into that funding, and we were starting to hit that halfway point where we were running out of half of our funds, and we didn't get enough done. You know, it was basically 4 months, almost 5 months, and we hadn't even built a thing yet. We were just deep into research, deep into trying to figure out what we're doing. We kind of jumped in first and then kind of tried to figure out what we're doing. So we came back to Gainesville in June of last year, and you know, we basically just took it from there. I got lucky enough that I knew a couple developers here that wanted to work with me for free, for sweat equity. So I got a back-end Python and Django developer to build our server side, and then I got a iOS developer to build our front end. And we actually wrote our first line of code after doing a summer of kind of customer validation in South Florida when I was down there before we moved up. So we had this idea of what we came to conclude by doing our market research with stores. And again, we didn't really go in there and pitch them on something. We kind of went into these boutiques in Lincoln Road and Washington Avenue, and stores at the Aventura Mall in Las Olas in Fort Lauderdale, and asked them a very basic question. We said, how are you guys using technology to improve your experience as a sales associate and the experience for your customers coming to your store? Ultimately making more money. So kind of asked a really open-ended question. And the range of answers we got was essentially that they were not doing enough with technology, but they also didn't know what they could be doing with technology. So what we kind of realized are, if you want to bring it down to the lean startup movement, the MVP for us, just a title for the thing we ended up deciding to build first, was basically a digital version of what they were currently using in the form of client binders. So if you think of CRMs like Salesforce, you know, Base CRM, Sugar CRM, there's a big space of customer relationship management software that has not made its way into the physical clothing store space. If you think about the boutique space, these are very expensive pieces of clothing, or shoes or jewelry. The customers are very well off. As you know, people with a lot of money nowadays have a lot of gadgets and iPads and smartphones. So it was kind of contradictory to us that you had this store that was servicing clients that were the perfect clients to basically have smart devices, and they were not being engaged with those devices in the store setting. So the very first thing we said we're going to build was going to be taking those client binders that they use to keep track of the customer information, phone number, email, and things like that, and then shift that to an iPad and add a whole visual component to it where they could actually visually keep track of what those people bought in their stores by using the camera on the iPad. So that was what we started building, is this kind of CRM for boutiques. And we wrote our first line of code in probably July or August of last year, and we took 5 months before we got it in the App Store for the first time in January. The first version we got in the App Store didn't communicate with our server, so somehow it got past, well, I take that back. It communicated with our server for the dummy account that we set up with the App Store. But if you wanted to create a new account, which is essentially the entire functionality of the application, it didn't work. So we had to pull it from the App Store, and then a month later, we got the fixed version because we never built in any time for testing. So we kind of, the moment that this thing, like the dummy account worked, we were like let's push it to the App Store, and if they turn us down, they turn us down. But they didn't turn us down. And that put us in a position to basically, we created hype before we were ready to create a little bit of hype. Shot ourselves in the foot a little bit there. And by this point, the funds were running extremely low. And we made a decision to start exploring what our options are on a company level. Like, should we try to raise more money? I mean, it's not like we weren't trying. It's very tough to raise money if you're not doing it full time. So me as the CEO, I was basically product managing, I was recruiting, I was doing all the social media. Anything that was not writing code came down to me. I even designed the whole application myself. So I didn't have time to talk to customers. I didn't have time to talk to investors. Things that are super important to be doing as a CEO, I just didn't have time to do. So come February, we have an app in the App Store, and we get an invitation to go pitch at an incubator, an accelerator actually, in Sunnyvale in Silicon Valley called Plug and Play. And they're starting their first batch for retail technology focused startups. Perfect niche for us. So I made the trip out there. I pitched. There's 21 companies pitching. There's a nice networking event later. It looked really good, and after about 2 weeks of deliberation, they basically got back to us and told us we're too early. So to me, that was probably the dagger that in showroom. And shortly thereafter, we decided to stop working on it. So showroom is now being wound down. We never got past that first product. We pulled our app from the App Store, and everyone's everyone's working on the product, is in the process of figuring out what they're going to do next. I found out what I'm going to do next. I took a job with a company in San Francisco. If you guys want to know more about that, I'll be happy to answer that in Q&A. And that's the showroom story. So I'm kind of really excited to just open the floor up for if any of you guys have any questions. I kind of purposefully left it kind of big pieces of that blank, if you guys, because I want to know what you guys think is interesting about the whole thing. I don't want to just guess. So yeah.
Would you learn from the failure?
From what?
Would you learn from the failure?
What did I learn from the failure? A lot of things. So I would say on a product, on a company level of, what's the fundamental function of a startup? It's to take something from an idea. It's people working together on an idea to get it to the marketplace, and then to scale what they've built so that it can be profitable and they can keep doing what they're interested in doing. What we failed to do is a few things. I think I touched on the fact that I didn't really have as much time as I'd like to actually talk to customers. So we did a horrible job of assuming, so if you look at the store as like a circle with 3 points. There's the owner of the store, who's the decision maker. And there was never any doubt about this. We knew that the store owner would be the decision maker for using our software. Then there's a manager, and then there's sales associates. Now, the way the boutique space is set up is that every single one of those pieces has an interest in increasing sales. The owner, for very obvious reasons, has an interest in increasing sales. And then the managers and the sales associates tend to get compensated based on sales as a commission form. So we assumed that if we built something compelling enough for the managers and the sales associates, that it would just be a matter of getting like one meeting with the owner, and that the owner would want to pay us for this thing that we've built that their team thinks could help them. And that was just wrong. So that was a huge assumption that we made to try to basically save resources. So the time that we basically said, let's not waste time talking to owners now if we're not ready. Let's make sure that when we sit down with owners, we're going to be ready, everything's good to go. All we need is just one meeting with them, and they'll give us the go on using the service. That's one mistake. The second mistake is I think that the original team of partners that we built did not really have complementary skill sets. So the 3 founding partners of Showroom were essentially business majors. We all really liked each other. We still really like each other. We still really respect each other. All 3 of us, I think those 2 guys are 2 of the smartest guys I know, but at the end of the day, they didn't really know how to do much stuff that I didn't know how to do. And I didn't.
Were they all veterans?
For that, finance and accounting background, people, like people that get along well with people that can talk, but they didn't know how to code, they didn't know how to design, none of us have ever done really sales, like some sort of major sales job before. So when it came down to actually building our idea, it never, the skills on the team were lacking. So I would say those are a couple mistakes that we made. Yeah.
So why don't you continue on it part-time while you do a full-time job?
Why do I not continue doing this part-time while I get a full-time job? I think that requires kind of like a personal assessment of my own kind of self, and I'm a very like all or nothing kind of guy. So the moment I'm into something, I don't really like to do things on the side that take away my focus from that thing. So, if you have only 24 hours in a day, every hour that you don't spend on what you're currently working on, you'll be kind of half-assing two things. That's how I see it. I think if I was a developer, or if I was a designer, I could probably find a way to maybe put some hours on the side because I have a much more concrete value proposition. But business guys like me, or just, I don't even know if I consider myself a business guy anymore. I'm just not a non-technical startup person. We don't really have I don't think I have as much to offer on a part-time basis as a developer, designer might.
Yeah, because like I think some technical people I spoke to, they say it's encouraged that they work on side projects. It's like it's let's say like to the company, it's like they're upgrading their skills. Even though you may be a startup that may take off later on and then they leave the company. But
I agree 100%. For my developers, Showroom was their side project. So my developers never really passed 15 hours a week each. So we were kind of, the reason our timeline for development was so slow was because we didn't have the resources to do it quicker. Yeah.
I'm just curious, now that you're kind of, you don't have a dog in the fight, so to speak. If you were the owners of some of these boutique shops, et cetera, your client base, what would you do to promote your goods and services better? Technology.
So if I owned one of the boutiques and
if you had maybe unlimited budget or something.
So let's say I own a boutique. I obviously use the software because it's right. So we're asking if I owned a boutique and I also built Showroom.
No. If you were just if you're trying to sell clothing, what do you think people need to be doing better?
Oh well, they need to know the customer better. I think that is universally understood by all the research, the white papers, the industry reports that I've read. Everyone understands the need to know the customer better. People are tired of walking into stores and feeling like it's their first time in a store they've been to like 100 times.
Did you say it was the store owner that you had trouble getting?
Yes, getting in front of.
Why do you think that if they know that, like you just said, why do you think, maybe you said that already?
No, I didn't say that. I think that first of all, the owners were a lot busier than we expected them to be. So we thought the owners would be in the stores more, and we actually never saw an owner in the store. We heard that we just missed the owner, or the owner's about to come in, but we had actually never gone to a store and saw the owner there. So the surprising thing to us about the owners is how hard they were to get in front of. But assuming we could get in front of them, I would expect what the managers told us that they expect as kind of objections from the owners were things like, we've been doing this way for like 10, 20 years, we're not going to change it now. We view technology as an enemy and not a friend because, e-commerce has wiped out a big percentage of brick and mortar stores. There's a little bit of animosity in the retail space against technology. And a lot of retail technology startups are trying to figure out how to position themselves as helpful rather than destroying jobs or whatever. So I think for us, the ideal use case would have been sales associates using this iPad app to keep track of all their customer information. And then when the store was empty, that is when no customers were in the store, think a rainy day in Lincoln Road. You're from Miami. Like nobody goes shopping on a rainy day in the summer in Lincoln Road. So there's sometimes 8 hours in one day where there's nobody shopping. And since it's the boutique space, they don't have enough inventory to create online stores. So that day, that store makes no money. So what we figured is, what if we could create a platform that would give the tool to the people that know the customers to reach out to the customers and say, take a picture of something that just came in and say, hey, this looks like something you might be interested in. If you come in today, by the end of the day, you get 10% off or something like that. Just super personalized offers in the form of email. And then we were going to build on top of that and create a whole interface for the consumers. So now the consumers, like the shoppers, will have the ability to see what's been uploaded in the store and communicate kind of proactively to the store, hey, I have 2 hours tomorrow to go shopping. I was wondering if I can come by at 5 o'clock tomorrow and try these things on in these sizes. And it streamlines the shopping experience for the customer. And our theory was that type of offering, that extra channel of doing business, that mobile channel, would increase customer loyalty with time. And therefore increase the lifetime value of a customer to that store, that they worked really hard to get to the store in the first place. Yeah.
In 1999, I bought the domain gainesvillemenus.com,
Mm-hmm.
and I tried to convince restaurant owners here in town to put their menus up on the web and pay me something. There were some problems with the whole business model, but one of it was that they couldn't imagine why their menu would need to be up on the web. And so, my question to you is, would you be interested in revisiting the startup when you think the technology is, or you know, the owners have come around, or do you think maybe, you know, you'll be beaten out by someone who's just at the right place, right time?
It's a really good question. So you're saying that you had I'm just repeating for the microphone. You had a hard time getting restaurant owners to see the value of having their menus online back in 1999. And I actually, you know, I know from talking to David, what they did with Eatable is, you know, they had a very similar challenge of getting restaurants to accept this technology and want to work with it. And it's 2014, so that's 15 years after that. So, you know, I think for me, I think the key drivers for this idea becoming a viable idea again are complete integration of tablets and smartphones into the physical store space as a base point. So it needs to get to the point, in my opinion, where that's kind of built into the operations of stores. Now, once you have that baseline that all these stores come equipped with a certain level of hardware, now you can start to build software to leverage those things. So for me, the original reason I thought that this was the right time was because of a trend called the showrooming trend, which is part of the reason we named ourselves Showroom. And the showrooming trend was something that basically people take their smartphones to physical stores. Well, they don't take them, they're already in your pocket. And when you're in a physical store, you actually look at something, you examine it. If it's an electronic thing, you play with it. If it's a piece of clothing, you try it on. And then if you want to buy it, you then go online from within the store and you actually price match it or find somewhere else to buy it online. And stores were super pissed off about this. So we figured, you know, if they're that pissed off, what if we came with something that would let them just kind of start the conversation technologically? I guess we never really addressed that specific problem for them. And I think we also never realized that the boutique merchandise was not what people were price comparing when they were in the store. So the kind of market that we chose as the perfect market for the technology and the clientele was the wrong market for the biggest pain point.
I know you're not still working on this, so I don't know, I'm kind of giving you just food for thought, but I was traveling kind of recently and I noticed in some Asian countries that they're actually building these like smart stores. Like for example, there's one where there's like a mirror and it's techy and you can pull up clothes and it kind of like tries it on your body, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So did you ever think of maybe trying showroom but just not in America and in places that are more embracing technology besides here?
No. And the reason is if you know, I couldn't get to where I wanted to get in the United States, which is like my home court, you know, I don't
Uphill battle.
I think it would be tough. I think you're just adding variables to the equation that you could mitigate, right? So if you're an entrepreneur, you're not taking uncalculated risk, you're trying to take calculated risk. So the entire idea of doing business in another country is something completely foreign to me, unless it would be in Israel, which is where, you know, I grew up there. So, but other than that, yeah, no. Thank you though. That's a good question. David.
If you were to start a new startup, what would you do differently?
So I'm not going to be starting a company, in my opinion, for another probably at least 3 years before I'll do another one. So I have no idea what I'll work on at that time. I actually am not one of the people with
What
like a
would you
long
do
list.
differently?
What do I do differently?
Like if you're running yourself a node right now, in 3 years, if I start my company, you know, these things to make sure I'm doing right.
I would say for me, the absolute deal breaker for starting my next company would be my co-founder, and I think one co-founder is smart, needs to be a full stack technology guy. So I need to be able to sit down with one person because it saves so much time coordinating meetings. And that one person needs to be able to, on his or her own, design the product, build the product, and then iterate as we go, so that we could be able to actually get that first product built so much quicker, and that way I can spend my time on the things that matter, like talking to customers and hiring and talking to investors, which are, you know, I basically had to design and product manage with because I had two developers, and one was a back-end developer and one was a front-end developer, and they were never in the office at the same time. So I was kind of serving as a bridge between these two developers who were each individually talented, but they weren't working together. So that was a huge waste of time, and not waste of time, but it was a huge inefficiency. So I would say that the one thing I have to absolutely have next time is at least a co-founder that can build whatever it is we're trying to build on their own, and have me kind of facilitate everything else. And I think that's what a really good non-technical founder does, is basically make sure that whatever gets built, turn off? Yeah, there you go. Whatever gets built gets to the market. It's validated by customers. You don't run out of money. You hire good people. You don't, all these things that are just not writing code and design product related, I think should fall on the non-technical founder, and that's kind of where I view myself next time. What was the original question? I want to make sure I answered it. I forgot.
It was like, what if you were writing a note to yourself?
Yeah.
What you would do?
I would say the second thing is make sure that I am going into a space that I know a lot better than this retail space that I went into. So yeah, I mean, we took 4 months, or arguably 5 or 6 months, including the whole part where we after decided to do software, we still did 2 months of research. So we did basically like 6 months of research after we jumped into it. And if you really think about it, the clock was ticking that whole time. So, next time I do it, I think it would be really smart of me to either find a way to do that research before I jump into it, or to just do a startup that is related to a space that I'll be involved in between now and then.
Let me make a follow-up question then. Do you think those 6 months of research were worth your time then?
Yeah. Well, if I didn't do the research, I don't even know what would happen. That wasn't even an option. So we didn't view it as research. We viewed it as we're starting a company. In hindsight, it was 6 months of research. I mean,
would you do the research again, or would you be like, let's do a product, put it out there, and post it?
well, we didn't have developers yet. So this was one of the main problems when we got started, is that we had so much to do that we spread ourselves so thin that we didn't make progress on any particular direction. We were kind of like being torn in this direction, like the technology direction, and then where do we want our store to be, and how are we going to hire people to work at the store, and then also where do we find designers to get to like put their clothes in our store, and the whole manufacturing supply chain that goes with that is a completely conversation of its own. So we learned a ton about how clothes get from the mind of a designer to the shelf. And it was important for us to understand that, so that we knew we weren't supposed to be in that space. And it was also important for us to learn that for a real estate piece in Miami, you better have a lot of money lined up. You better have a bank that will give you a loan. You have some co-signers. You need a credit score. You need a lot of these places require you to sign a 5-year lease. Like things that we just absolutely had zero idea of what we were getting into until we looked into it. And now I know. So yeah, I mean, it was very valuable, and I can talk to people. I know something now that I didn't. I know a lot of things now that I didn't. Yeah.
So I've come to realize how easy it is to become emotionally invested in your own startup. So can you talk a little bit about when the time came when you realized you had to pull the plug, how you basically converted that and how you were able to bounce back, more importantly. And that's also slightly personal, so if you don't want to answer, just say pass.
Oh, no, I'm happy to talk about that. I think it's important. I think people don't talk about that enough. 9 out of 10 startups fail. And that is not 9 out of 10 ideas fail. That is, for every 10 people that put their best foot forward, quit their job, do, like you said, fully emotional invested, 9 out of 10 of those teams fail. it doesn't get phrased that way often enough where people can actually visualize it. So the turning point, before I answer your original question, was when I realized that, that it's not like I am a failure. It's that there's a lot of smarter people than me, a lot of more equipped people than me, people that even like started something in their own space that failed. So for me to have gotten as far as I've gone in software is pretty miraculous in the first place. So the moment I realized all that, I got better. But yeah, I mean, I would say, bless you. I would say the moment we realized we were going to pull the plug, it was more, I think it was an internal realization. It wasn't as much a group decision as it was kind of just me realizing like, wow, this was around probably November, December, and it had been a couple months since I'd like learned something. So, I'd basically been like product managing and learning design and learning, what is front end versus back end, and the iteration cycle, how to get something in the app store, how to get a website up and running, Facebook page, Twitter page. There was all this stuff going on. So I was always like, going. And then it came a point where we had all that stuff built already. Like all of it was up. And the only thing we were waiting on was the product to be done and then to find customers. And since I couldn't walk away from the product and I didn't have any customers, it was kind of like I was stuck. And I was stuck for like 2 or 3 months where, I was super not productive. And it wasn't because I didn't like go to the office. I would go to the office and I'd be like, today I'm gonna be productive, and I just would get nothing done because I don't think like I knew what I was supposed to be working on. It was kind of like, what am I supposed to be doing right now? So I think when the money was about to run out, that's when a certain financial reality sets in. When you're like, okay, this isn't just me not happy with this anymore. This is me like, do I go try to raise money and try to convince an investor to invest in me, even though I'm no longer in love with this process? Or do we basically just kind of fold it all up, say we learned a lot, this was awesome, and then figure out the next move? So that was kind of the thought process behind it. And it was very difficult. The moment you realize that this thing you've been working on for a year and all your friends and family know about it, and you quit a job that was, for me, it was a very high paying job to do it. There's a lot at stake. There's a lot on the line as far as your reputation, your credibility to people goes. And I think that was something I struggled with for like a couple months. But like I told you, the moment I realized, I definitely got some help, a lot of support from my friends, and I realized that it wasn't as big of a deal as, in my head I thought it was. And there's zero, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, this is something I was like, is that you tie your self-worth directly overlapping with the value of the startup that you're building or your idea or whatever. And there was, for a year, there was zero separation for me between Ben and Showroom. It was like one entity. So the moment I could I had a lot of friends and family and mentors and stuff come to help me, and they totally reminded me like, Ben is this person, and then Showroom is just something that Ben was like working on. And that is that's a very hard realization to truly internalize. But the moment I did it, it was like no looking backwards, and I decided I was gonna go look for a job and try to get the best, funnest job that I could find.
I think that's really interesting. You're totally right. We don't actually talk about this anywhere near enough, and the conversation was never phrased in that it's not 9 out of 10 idea. It's not people putting, like you said, their best foot forward. No. Really quick follow-up question.
Yeah.
You said earlier that there's going to be another 3 years before you would try and do another string of this.
It's a completely made up number, but it's definitely not going to be in the near term.
Okay.
It's like your 5-year financials.
Yeah, but yeah, it's gonna be a little bit before I try again. So sorry to interrupt you, but.
But I was wondering why. Just financial reality.
So you know how like, I think so. There's a couple things that come to mind. The first one is that I feel like there's a lot of lessons from this process that I haven't had a chance to fully digest yet. So I think it would be doing a disservice to what I just went through, to not give myself enough time to like really internalize everything that went wrong. The second thing is that you know, the same way if you have a long-term girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, and you break up, you know, oftentimes the last thing you want is to go into another committed relationship. And you know, having partners is it's a full-time. I mean, I've never been married, but I can imagine it's the closest thing to marriage I've ever been to, and it sucks sometimes. Like, it really does, because you know, it's not like an employee where you can, like, you have a gut feeling for whether they're doing well or not, and then you can kind of let them go or give them feedback, and they'll improve and try to impress you or whatever and get a raise or whatever. You have zero financial resources to work with. You have no product in the market. You have a vision, like a blurry vision of what you're building, because again, you know, even the best entrepreneurs don't know exactly where they're going to end up. And now you're supposed to somehow reconcile your vision and how you're going to get there with another person's vision and how they want to get there. And sometimes they'll have no idea, and they'll be driven by maybe fear of failure rather than maybe the potential of doing well. Where maybe they'll be driven by the need to make money rather than the potential to build an amazing product. Very fundamental things, like the same reason you will not marry a woman because maybe she doesn't share the same values in the home as you. Very similar to partners. So for me, I think I just don't know anyone right now that I think could be a really good partner to me. And second, I don't have an idea I'm really passionate about. And third, I've actually never seen what it looks like when a startup is doing really well from the inside. And I think, you know, on one hand, I had the showroom experience where we took an idea to, you know, 5 people on the team. And then on this side, I had, you know, my investment banking experience at a really big bank. And there's a whole lot in that middle that I've never seen. And that's the kind of space I'm looking to get my next learning experience in.
If before beginning showroom you had the ability to watch 100 other Bens in 100 other places have the same discussion, would that have saved you from these problems, or were these problems that one way or the other you were going to hit those walls because this was your first attempt at a startup, and it could only be experienced at a personal level and not at second-hand level?
I think the latter. I'm a really, like, I need to experience it to understand it kind of person. So I'm very bad at, like, reading manuals and websites. Yeah.
It's always, the guy speaking is an idiot, right? You know, he's telling me all these things so he didn't do. He's an idiot. It's not gonna be me. I'm gonna make the right choices.
Exactly.
So you always exception. So there's many things where you have to go through to live them. We're not as smart as learning from what people tell us, even though we should be doing that. Sometimes you just have to go through the experience to really understand it and fall.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, there was definitely a lot of people that told us, you know, what this isn't going to work. Like, you know, in the beginning, it was actually surprisingly that the number of those people was surprisingly low. It was like suspiciously low. Like everyone we talked to either did a really good job of explaining why we're doing this or how big the problem was. So everyone that we talked to, for the most part, said, like, this is a great idea. You guys are going to do awesome. And that got us through that, like, research phase. We're like, damn, like, we're onto something here. Like, we got to stick with it. If I had had myself now to go back and convince my old self, I probably could do it, but it would be very difficult. And, you know, I would have to put things in, and it's very tough to remember now my mindset, you know, a year and 3 months ago. I'm a different person. So the type of innocence and naive outlook on the process of building a company is gone. You could say I'm a little bit, I'm a little bit more cynical. I'm a little bit more realistic. But I think that those traits are underrated in entrepreneurs. And I think the next time I do it, it's going to be healthy to have a more realistic plan for, like, what I'm doing. You know, so it is good to have a kind of like an ambiguous vision for where you're going. But I think if my next venture, I think I will listen more. So I think I've learned to maybe I think I've learned who the right people would be to maybe ask certain questions and leverage them in the future would probably be the better move.
Ben, where are you going? What are you going to do?
So I accepted a job with a company called Life 360 in San Francisco, and
Wait, how many people have you guys heard of Life 360?
Sounds really familiar.
Dude, this startup is so serious. I found out about them last year. I mean, they are like, I think they have more users than Foursquare, right?
they have twice the number of users that
Twice the
Square
number,
has.
and it is like the app for families. So it is not just any startup. It is like an awesome startup. I'm so pumped.
Well, I guess a
for
round
it.
of applause.
Yeah, so awesome.
No, so I haven't done anything yet. So,
You've been accepted.
so this company is they've been around for 6 years, co-founded by two guys from Berkeley. They pitched at a Google hackathon 6 years ago. They won a $300K grant from Google at that hackathon. And then they've been working on it ever since. They have 45 employees now. They've raised $24 million to date. They're about to raise a major Series C and have over 60 million downloads. Plan to double in size over the next year. So I'm going to be joining in a pretty ambiguous role as an associate project manager.
Look, my mom just arrived at home.
Yeah,
Life 360.
you can set up geofences around locations for people that you're in your circle. So basically, I have 3 circles: my dad's circle, my mom's circle, and then I have my coworker's circle. And within each circle, you can set up places. And so TJ has a place set up at home, and he gets a notification every time his mom comes home, and probably every time she leaves home.
Yep.
So he can kind of make sure she's okay without bugging her all the time. Yeah, so that's a really good point.
Tell them your why. You have to tell them the why. Like,
So,
why you believe it.
I think, I definitely had my reservations about whether this company is too invasive for me to be comfortable with. Is this like stalkery, or is this something else? And I think the world is undeniably moving in a direction of more transparency, less privacy, more social sharing, a more connected world, as Mark Zuckerberg would put it. So if you were to take that assumption of this stuff happening anyways, I think it's really important to be part of one of the companies engineering that future and making sure that it's doing it ethically, doing it the right way, making sure that the experience is as good as it could be with the technology. But also at the end of the day, I think we have a really big problem in our society, or we've had one, is that there's not as much transparency as there could be, which leads to less trust in the systems. And less trust, any economist will probably agree with you, creates less efficiency. There's less trades that go around because people trust each other less. So I think what we're going to see over the next 10 years with this whole shift in privacy is not so much people caring about people knowing where they are, but I think it's going to bring more transparency and trust into systems and increase the overall efficiency of our economy. So if you can start a conversation with someone instead of, where are you, but rather, hey, let's do this, you're essentially eliminating a whole piece of the conversation that is kind of irrelevant. I mean, the reason you ask someone where they are is because you want to know where they are. If you're extracting a piece of information out of them that you will then take to ask a question or say something else. If you can eliminate that piece of the conversation, you're essentially increasing the efficiency of communication by a whole, order of magnitude. So, being part of a company that's actually engineering that firsthand is something, really exciting.
I think we're gonna transition to
Cool.
Blue Bear.
Thank you.
And Ben, it was really awesome, and you shared a piece of yourself with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.